All right.
All right.
Alex, good to see you, my friend.
Good to see you, Ben.
Thanks for being here. We'll give some folks a second here to trickle in, um, but just a second or two. All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. Welcome to the ESTA Live, presented today by the ESTA Research and Data Committee. The mission of the Esports Trade Association is to unify, serve, and ethically advance the business interests and sustainability of the esports industry. Today, we're going to discuss probably the buzziest topic of 2022, second to COVID. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's not the buzziest topic. There have been a lot of things to buzz about, but a very buzzy topic. And that, of course, is the metaverse. So we're going to go through some insights today on kind of who metaverse early adopters and curious consumers are. But before we get into that, I want to introduce you to Alex. And I also want to encourage everyone, as we're going through this, to leave your comments, introduce yourselves. Where are you from? What do you do in the industry? We love that. We have Peyton here, Dallas, Texas. Great to see you, Peyton. Thanks for joining us. All right, we'll give some other folks, see if they chime in. Alex, why don't you tell us where are you from, man?
Hello, everybody. I'm Alex. I'm located in Chicago, Illinois, born and raised in the Windy City. Left for about 10 years on the East Coast for grad school and work at Monumental Sports and Entertainment, where I was a data nerd at the business intelligence department there. So I don't know. The big thing that people probably need to know about me is I'm a data nerd at heart, and in Chicago, where we started our own company at Trajectory. So yeah, excited to be here today, Ben.
That's awesome. Where were you East Coast when you were over here for a bit?
I was, I don't know, I'm going to have a lot of people turn on me very quickly here if I divulge too much, but no, I spent 2 years at Duke from grad school for my MBA. So I was in Durham, North Carolina, which, by the way, if you've never been to Durham, North Carolina, it is an amazing place to go now. Like
It is.
Foodie Town, USA, awesome, highly recommend. Then I was up in Washington, D.C. for about half a decade at Monumental. So,
Awesome.
yeah, love the East Coast.
Very nice. Well, and I'm tuning in from New York City in our YouGov's Midtown office. So right in the heart of things. Awesome. Well, let's get into it. We have Adam also joining from DC. Hey, Adam, good to see you, my friend. So, Alex, tell us about Trajectory and this company you've founded. I can just say congrats on your initial success, your early success. I know
Thanks.
you guys are doing a lot of really cool work.
We've been
Tell us
very
about it.
fortunate. We've been very fortunate to grab a lot of traction. The long story short is one of the things that I think our founders and myself have realized is that data reporting as it relates to sponsorship data on the team side and on the agency side and on the brand side, it's a pain in the butt. It's hard, and a lot of vendors out there today are focusing on social and they're focusing on television, which is great. They're super important, but there's so much else out there: LED, static signage, out of home, email, web data, mobile information, podcasts. There are so many different things going out there that go unreported on. And so I think we've really figured out the rest of the puzzle here at Trajectory. We're a data analytics company, technology, helping the world's biggest brands effectively evaluate their sponsorship impact. So we're working with tons of professional teams and brands and agencies to really help them figure out and quantify, hey, like what is all this sponsorship actually worth at the end of the day? So we do some pretty cool stuff. Like I said, data nerd at heart. So of course, leave it to me to build a company that ended up sitting at the intersection of technology, data, and analytics. So good
Yeah.
stuff. We have a rocket ship as a logo, so back
So,
to space.
up
Space is
and to the
cool.
right. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
awesome.
always, always.
So, and how much of it sounds like the work you're doing is kind of multi-touch, traditional and digital as well. And have you guys dive into the metaverse at all? Is this on your radar? We'll be talking a lot about it here.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the big thing for us is, like, how do you story tell, and connecting sort of the non-traditional and the digital worlds has historically been really, really difficult to do. And so it takes, I think, a special crew and a special methodology to try to figure out to blend these two things together. So we've done that extremely, extremely well for groups that we work with. And Metaverse, yeah, I mean, what we're here to talk about today, it's a totally different world that we're starting to see the industry move into, and slowly but surely in some aspects. But us personally, like, yeah, it's on our radar. We're doing a lot of due diligence and a lot of research on just to better understand like what the opportunities are going to be, and hopefully eventually partner and beta test a lot of this with current clients that we have that are starting to get into Metaverse to start to figure out what are the implications. But as I'm sure we'll talk about coming up here, there is so much to this world, which just means like the opportunities are effectively endless. So a huge space, and yeah, excited to talk about it today.
Very nice. And I realize I need to share my screen here, so everyone else can see what we're going to talk about. So give me 1 second there. Um, it's not as easy on LinkedIn to just pick a screen.
I should have
Sorry, bear with
stalled. I
me.
should have been ready with some data jokes that we can
I
share,
know.
telling
I actually
people.
thought I was already sharing here, so that is very much on me. Well, while I pull that up, the metaverse, of course, is a very new thing. I work at YouGov. We are a global market research firm that works with brands, agencies, media properties, kind of across all sectors. But sports and gaming and esports are a big one for us in an area where we've been growing a lot. I've had the pleasure over the last. I've been here about 2 years, and um, I've had the pleasure over the last year and a half or so to be at the front lines and helping brands and agencies kind of measure the success of their metaverse investments. I'll talk about a few of those use cases as we get into this, but first, I'm sorry, bear with me all. Um, do, 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 do.
Next time we do a Metaverse, we should be broadcasting live from the Metaverse.
I
Food
think
for
you are
thought.
spot on there. We got to send everyone some VR goggles first, ESTA branded, of course.
Of course.
Yeah. All right. Sorry, so it's fun. Um, it is uploading. Oh, wait, here we go. All right. Technical. I swear I am 32, not 62. I should know how to do these things. There it is. All right, we got screens here. All right, well, we've been introduced to Alex and I a bit. I guess just to round out my intros here. My focus is gaming, esports, and technology brands. So yeah, we work with a lot of teams and agencies as they're bringing brands to life within gaming and esports. We help them kind of understand the market opportunity for their brand on kind of what the right gaming and esports touch points are. And then once they have activated the brand in those spaces, how do we measure success? And so, I see a future, Alex, where maybe we get to partner in some cool opportunities together.
I think so. YouGov is badass. So all the way around.
Appreciate that. Today we have some research from YouGov that we're going to go through. So this is, we defined the metaverse, and there's a couple different ways, kind of think about the metaverse and what the metaverse is. I mean, for some, they think the metaverse is something that still is coming, but I think for us that are more in the know, the metaverse is here. It's been here for a while. Roblox is a metaverse. I mean, I've heard arguments of, well, the existing Facebook was a metaverse, and now, of course, they're branding as Meta, and so they have big ambitions to be maybe a more what we think about as kind of fully fleshed out metaverse with VR and avatars and all these things. YouGov in this research defined the metaverse as a virtual world where you can create an electronic version of yourself and then take part in activities on your devices and associated equipment. So the important thing here is there is the avatar component. You are interacting with other folks in some kind of virtual space. It's not necessary that you have virtual goggles, though. So that could be accessing on your phone or your laptop or whatever you choose to do. The research here is being pulled from an interview of 4,000 nationally representative people across the US and UK. And it was conducted in March of 2022. And then we connected that custom research to YouGov Profiles. That's our very large syndicated database that's being updated at all times, collected from a panel of 20 million people around the world. So hopefully, some of you have heard of YouGov. If you haven't, definitely recommend you check it out. Real time is our custom research mechanism where this particular survey on metaverse behaviors and interest was conducted, and then we can connect the data to profiles, as I said. Ultimately, what we do is help brands explore, plan, activate, and track killer marketing campaigns. So the metaverse, it's been here for a while. It's around. Look, I mean, I think it's amazing that Ad Age now has articles like what the top 5 metaverse activations you need to know about right now. That was published just a few weeks ago. this is very much top of mind for advertisers on all sides of the marketing agenda. And I've really there's dozens of different types of activations that could be highlighted. I've just taken some screenshots from three that were cited in this Ad Age article, and doing some really cool things. So a lot of these take the form of virtual worlds that gamers can interact in. There's often some special prizes, discounts, maybe NFTs, which could be badges or other avatar accessories that people can collect through these experiences. And then there's Fortnite, which is metaverse in and of itself for sure, but a bit of a different type of metaverse that's really fully publisher owned and operated. But there are of course, like ways for brands to activate within there as well, as we see with the Balenciaga skins that they're bringing in.
I think
Um,
what's really interesting here, by the way, just to call it out, and
yeah,
I think the viewpoint I'm just going to try to take today, just for everybody, is just given my background on like sponsorship and data and like reporting, like my sort of 2 cents throughout today is going to be about like buy sell side of like sponsorship and partnership. So I'll always try to sort of look through it in that lens. I think what's really interesting about what you mentioned here, though, it's the wide variety and the spectrum, the different types of layers of integrations within these partnerships that are effectively occurring. Right, some of them are very straight line, which is just you see a logo in the background and it just sort of exists and it's there like a typical advertising campaign, versus the much more integrated layers, which we'll talk a little bit more about in here, I think, of brands finding more engaging ways to work with individuals that were within the metaverse. So it's a wide spectrum here in terms of what we've seen already, and I think that's only going to continue to evolve.
yeah, I think that's absolutely right. We're kind of in the experimentation phase and seeing brands do increasingly innovative things. Early on, it was a lot of just kind of a digital rendering of a billboard, but now in a digital space, and it's already evolved to these full, unique worlds and experiences that people can participate in. And we have some early research on how those are landing with consumers and moving the needle for various brand KPIs. So, kind of starting at the top, who knows what the metaverse is? People on this webinar right now, listening to this chat, I am no doubt we over-index on metaverse understanding. We A lot of people here, sure, work in gaming and esports. It's very much top of mind for us, but that's not the true with everybody in the world. So we asked kind of starting at the top, have you ever heard of the metaverse with that definition of how I described the metaverse at the beginning? And we see that about 55% of Americans say that they have and indeed heard of a metaverse. There's still a third out there who say that they have not, and then a small 8% who said they don't know. Overall, I think that not a whole lot of differences here between U.S. and U.K. And then when we look at kind of the gender, or pardon me, the demographic age breakdown of people who are aware versus unaware, no surprises here. But people who are 18 to 24, the younger you are, the much more likely you are to be aware of a metaverse and the concept of it. Alex, anything else that stands out to you here? It's pretty
I think,
normal.
I mean, I think the big sort of headline here is, the majority are aware of this. So if you're a brand, right, like this is a good space to start getting involved in. It's not something that's unknown. Like it's a relatively known commodity, across the U.S. and the U.K. So like for me, like I just look at this as it's overwhelming evidence to effectively say, hey, like this is an opportunity if you're not getting involved in it to at least start thinking about, because it's front and center. It continues to grow and people know about it. So I think that's the headline for me on this.
Yeah, absolutely. And so awareness is kind of step one. And I think the the next step, and we'll get into kind of understanding what the metaverse is. And I think as we've already alluded to, there's mixed feelings on that. It can mean a lot of different things to different people right now. But interest in the metaverse is the next question we're looking at here, and some of the demographics of those folks. So overall, and we'll see this spelled out through different insights throughout this deck, but Americans seem to be ahead of the curve compared to our British counterparts in interest, and also, as we'll see later, adoption into the metaverse. So right now, over a quarter of all Americans have an expressed interest in it. And I don't think it surprises folks, but very much leans male, and then younger again, of course.
Why do you think, I mean, I know we were talking about this offline previously, but sort of the difference as to why the US, at least, versus the UK here is ahead, and perhaps it's just because of the fact that it more or less started in the US. I mean, I imagine that's where part of it is. I don't know. Curious if you have thoughts on that, Ben, in terms of why that discrepancy in Delta.
Yeah, actually, I put together some charts later on in the deck,
Yeah.
looking at tech adoption and some kind of reasons for gaming within both markets, and you will see there, just kind of Americans are generally more tech adoptive, and Brits are more likely to say that they don't buy the next generation of technology until what they have is broken, and they really kind of have a need for what's out there. So I think I think a lot of that is into play. Just Americans having an expressed higher interest in new technology and what they can do in digital spaces.
We're impatient. We have to have the new big thing.
That's
Got it.
right. And we always have to be status signaling.
Yeah, 100%.
So through our research, we identified kind of four groups across a spectrum of people who have, expressed interest in the metaverse or who have actually gone in and experienced it yet. And we'll be focusing on the two groups here on the left, the trialists and the curious. Now, I think a really big highlight here, and I've already kind of said it, is Americans have been much faster to try out the metaverse. So 15% of Americans right now claim that they've already been into a metaverse versus only 4% of UK. And now, similarly, now the curious group is 51% of remaining Americans who have expressed interest but haven't been into it yet. And then there's two-thirds of Brits who are also curious. So it will be interesting to see how companies within UK and maybe this also applies to broader Europe are going to focus their strategies to bring people from curiosity into actually trialing things in the metaverse. But overall, if you add up those trialists and curious to kind of into a broader interested group, a very similar size of a population across both countries that are interested.
And I think what's interesting here, and again, trying to sort of approach this from like the brand agency sort of like viewpoint, and I certainly don't mean to make like broad sweeping strokes here and assumptions, but what's interesting about trialists, right? Like I sort of equate them as like the early adopters, and generally speaking, again, like so many early adopters, generally seen as either thought leaders, generally more risk tolerant than others because they're trying this new technology. So like for brands that are sort of like more on like the cutting edge and like want that to be sort of part of their brand identity, I think there's a great opportunity there. The curious, certainly with the 51%, I think very, very large opportunity where people are trying to learn more about it. That's effectively the next wave that's going to come into this to be like your real, like true, like active users. Like that's going to be like the new age. So like the whole demographic of the persona is going to change over time as a lot of these curious individuals come into more of like the actual active state users. So that I think more than anything else signals the fact that this is just going to get much, much bigger a lot faster. And the one that we don't touch on too much, but it's also like the uncertain group. That's probably going to end up being more about education and time,
Hmm.
right? Just about like what it is, like where the opportunities are, especially as the space evolves. But yeah, I mean, like here, I think this is just this is a pretty good focus on the opportunity as it exists today, as well as I think even the larger opportunity with what we're going to see coming into the space, within the next couple of years. So yeah,
Yeah,
this is really exciting to see how this data broke out.
yeah, and I agree with all of that. I think I just want to highlight that this is 18 plus insights as well. So we're not even looking at kind of the teenage demographic, but I don't think it's uh, what's the right word? A statement that would be refuted to say that controversial statement to say that younger people are even also curious and early adopters as well. So as the population ages up, we'll see kind of more adoption of the metaverse as well with time. So to back to your question, Alex, on kind of why people are more interested, why Americans more interested in the metaverse. So I looked at some statements around, having access to VR headsets already in their home and other um, psychographics around tech adoption. And so that one that I called out before was the fourth one down. That in the UK, people are a lot more likely to say they only replace tech products when they go wrong or are broken. And then Americans over-index across the rest of these statements. First on just having access to a VR headset in the home. Now, reminder from what I said before, not necessary to have a VR headset to participate in the metaverse, but a signal nonetheless. And just all these kind of actively looking for new technology and wanting to be first among their friends on tech adoption. So those are some reasons that I pulled out of the YouGov profiles data on why Americans are ahead of the curve.
Cool.
All right, so digging now to kind of the demographics of two of those, the interested groups, the trialists and the curious. I think, again, some cool things here. The trialist, the people who have already been in the metaverse, they skew even further to being male, and that's true across both markets. They skew younger, and also having kind of higher average income than the national Gen Pop population. We look at some kind of real life hobbies of trialists in both countries, and you had some kind of interesting comments on some of these. Actually, maybe more specifically with the curious members. I thought so. We can jump ahead to that unless you have anything you want to add here.
Sure. No, I mean, I think I'll probably end up making the same comment on the next one.
Cool. Before we get there, and these are similar takeaways across trialists and curious consumers, but generally, this group compared to Gen Pop, they are very open to branded products and sponsorship. So you can see like they're 3 times more likely to say that they are a sucker for anything branded, even if it's expensive. They enjoy playing games on social media, of course, and they also seek experiences that will make for great content on their social media. So I think that kind of, I said that earlier on like signal statusing, but just social media generation and wanting to be part of the trend is definitely key here. And then cryptocurrency has a huge overlap with the early trialists into metaverse as well.
The other interesting thing I'll just make a quick comment on here is like that 76% that you see at the bottom, right? And I think you just mentioned this is like seeks experiences that will make for great content on my social media. This just always kind of reminds me back to like the old like marketing and like partnership sponsorship adage of, the point is you want to make whoever your consumer is like the hero of their own story. I just look at this as an interesting signal to say if someone's looking for content to be able to promote like sort of themselves and their own personal brand, that's a totally different avenue, like depending on like the type of like brand or sponsor you might be. If you're that type of brand that has like that really like super highly like postable content, like just seems like that could be a really interesting match there. And then yeah, to your point, I think the core takeaway is like highly influenceable people effectively here that are looking to brands and influencers. So yeah, good call outs.
Yeah, and I'd say also on kind of that seeking experiences, this is the metaverse. One of its big appeals is just how cool it is, like just to say it bluntly. And so, if you have an experience that is very shareable because it just looks awesome, like that makes a difference and is more likely to be kind of shared and celebrated. I mean,
Yeah.
kind of spinning off of what you said, if you can make a consumer into your own, brand. Um, brand specialists and loyalists and promoter of your brand, what better way than to give them an experience that they want to share with others? So looking at now are kind of curious, so the people that are drawn to the idea of the metaverse but haven't um, d- dove in yet. We see that in America, it's a 50-50 split, male female, which I think is really interesting. A bit older than our early adopters. When I look at this group, I kind of think about my dad. He's a tech guy. He's really into science fiction and fantasy type things. And if he's listening, I hope he's not. It doesn't disagree, but he is. He showed me Star Trek, and I'm a big Trekkie, and I think if it was an easy access point for him to experience the metaverse, that would appeal to him, maybe even more than some video games that are out there today that are just more story based. Like when you can be in the story, I think that's something that would appeal to him, and others like him. And then here was where I think some of the real life hobbies of the curious group are interesting, because you can start to think about, well, how can you recreate these experiences in the metaverse? Any thoughts there?
Well, so anyway, what you just said actually sparked my one quick story I want to say.
Please.
So interesting. So my mother she actually has a VR headset, and so
Okay.
she's fully into the metaverse, but she uses it totally differently, I think, than most people do. Where she's more about like seeing experiences, like a lot of like museums, like have
Hmm.
all sorts of like curations in terms of like their collections. So she uses it in a totally different way but has still been able to find ways to be able to be inclusive and use and engage with the metaverse. So that was just an interesting call out about your dad, because that just also made me realize that like there is something for everyone to a certain degree. I think what's interesting here, to your exact point, is more of an even balance, like male versus female. And again, if we're thinking about like these are the individuals that are curious, this is sort of like the next age, the next group that's going to get a lot more active into this. So I look at this as one, if you're a brand, if you're an agency, if you're looking to be engaged and involved, one, like this is what's coming down the pipe. So if you were sort of scared away with, oh, it's all, mostly male dominated, like that's not going to be the case moving forward, right? That's going to start to even out, especially as we see this group coming into it. But I think what we had been talking about offline, and I think this is what's really interesting about your data that you guys have here at YouGov, is starting to identify, of this group that's coming in, this next wave, like what are the different hobbies and things that they're interested in engaging with now. So it's like you see exercising, outdoor sports, and gardening, and cooking. And on the last slide, don't worry about going back, but like with trialists, there's like cooking and playing games on devices. How do you as a brand start to recognize that, hey, a lot of your core constituents now outside of this whole world are going to be the next wave in here? And so can you start to bridge that gap and bridge that story, in terms of like why you should start to get involved and start to actually partake in this as well? Because again, this is where the whole thing is moving. So can you find those like interests, those types of personas, and start to use brands in those areas to really start to double down and get more engaged?
Yeah, and I love that anecdote about your mom. We'll see in a little bit. There are some kind of activities people are most excited about in the metaverse, and traveling to destinations is one of the top ones to pop out. And I was thinking about that more, and this is my own kind of filter on lens on things, but I was thinking about it still more of that male dominated younger consumer. But you're exactly right. Travel is expensive, and takes a lot of energy, and it's obviously a great thing to do. But there are plenty of really cool immersive experiences that will continue to be built out in the metaverse, and I think they'll become more and more real feeling, as technology continues to evolve.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, I think the takeaway is that there's a lot of eclectic tastes,
yeah,
right? And there's a lot of eclectic people here, and something for everyone to a certain degree. So it's certainly not just the focal point or focus of a niche demographic that it might have been 5, 6, 10 years ago.
yeah, and I love it when the data kind of brings it all together. But top left here, 82% of the curious group, they agree brands need to find innovative ways to market themselves and their products. So there you have it. I mean, if they're a brand experience like that, something new, could actually draw more people into the metaverse. I mean, it doesn't necessarily to be kind of metaverse first. It can actually be brands that bring people there and draw their interest.
I think, yeah.
Um, Anything you want to add there?
No, I was just gonna say it just seems like the top two, sorry, the top two on the right, it's kind of like supports the theory of like waiting and seeing, like who else is out there. Is it more established? And the bottom left to the 64 and the 47, it's more of like they're aware of like what's to come, right? Like
Right.
they're aware that artificial intelligence, exists. They believe that cryptocurrency is, the wave of the future in financial structure. So it's you have this interesting group that's sort of on the sidelines, but at the same time they sort of see the field, right? They know what's going to happen. They sort of see this all coming and evolving. But again, for whatever reason, they're sort of on the sidelines waiting to jump in and become more active. So
Yeah.
it's an interesting insight, because how do you activate and how do you push them over the edge? Is it a function of time, or is it a function of a certain action or milestone or event occurring that then gives it the credibility to say, oh yeah, like I'll get involved as well. So it's,
Right.
interesting.
No, I totally agree. It's kind of again like the kind of technical barriers that need to be, hurdles that need to be come down, and then they'll really be drawn in. And I do think that's an opportunity for brands, to kind of build these experiences that are enough of a draw for someone to try something completely new because it just sounds too cool to miss. All right, so going deeper here, we gathered some consumer perceptions of the metaverse today, and we did notice some kind of misconceptions among British and American public that we'll highlight. So first is kind of expectations of the metaverse. I think Americans, we can see here. I mean, a virtual reality experience is kind of high level. Yes, that's to some degree that's what it will be. But I think for Americans in particular, it pops out like the social media element and the virtual meeting space, as two areas where Americans in particular expect the metaverse to fill those gaps. And then virtual live events, of course, is another kind of area that's out there. But ultimately, I think that it's not necessarily a video game per se. It's more about interaction and having this virtual interaction in space to play in, but not a video game. So some other kind of understanding of the metaverse. In in the UK, there's a kind of a high group of people who feel that it's being built and controlled by Facebook, and there's also a third of Americans who believe that to be the case. But it seems to be much more of a skew there for Britons. And we see here kind of it only existing in virtual reality, but about a third across both countries, I think, agree to the statement that most closely aligns with my perception of the metaverse, which is it's a virtual world where you can do anything and be anything and do anything you want. Other thoughts here, Alex?
Other than my dog
You
popping in
got a you
behind
got a
me.
ghost coming in behind
I
you.
know, I got my dog. He's underneath me now. No, I mean, I think the headline here is that it's still an education play, right? People are still trying to figure out like what exactly it is and how to use it and how to engage with it. And so I think the headline here really is just that y- people aren't totally aware of, I think, what the opportunities are for engagement. And that's not just for brands, but it's talking about the individuals itself. So I think if anything, it just speaks to the fact that this is still a relative. The space has been around for actually a while, but in terms of the technology itself, which has really evolved, I'd say in the last like 3 to 5 years, there's still a lot of education to be done.
Yep. Agreed. And then I will just, call out to, a quarter of Americans, they see it as a way you can buy and sell things, and they understand kind of the economy that will exist or does exist within metaverses. Okay, so now we're going to talk about kind of engagement with the metaverse a bit further. So how are people getting into the metaverse is kind of the primary um, takeaway from this section. We see that, in general, again, Americans are more diverse in their understanding of how they can get into the metaverse. So I was talking about this before. It's not just VR headsets; it can also be accessed through a smartphone or a computer to be, access into another world experience. In the UK, it really seems to be focused on the virtual headset experience. So maybe some misconception there of what a metaverse can include.
Right, and I think that's one of the comments that I had, which is if I consider having a headset, and I probably actually should have worn mine today and looked like an idiot, and that would have been fun. But it doesn't have to be fully immersible, right? To be a virtual world that you're being able to engage with. And I think you're starting to see that a lot on the right here within the U.S. is that it's multiple different devices, right? It's not just about a headset; it can also be a smartphone or some other device. I am very curious to see how these numbers change over time because I imagine that as a lot more of this starts to pick up, across in the UK and across the world, that you're going to start to see the same skewing going up. But for me, it's again, it's an education play that as more people get involved, people will start to understand a little bit more functionally that it's not just a very niche thing where you have to have a headset and running into your wall at full speed. If you've ever seen those
Yeah,
YouTubes,
that's a
right?
breaking your TV.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think also, as demand for the metaverse grows, that's also going to drive more demand for faster 5G connections and a network that's consistent across, the world ultimately. And as a New Yorker, like, why don't I have Wi-Fi or cell service in the subway yet? Like it's crazy. I complain about it once a week. But yeah, so I think again comes back to technology, and as it grows, adoption will follow. So here are some of the kind of the top activities that people are interested in the metaverse, and I think really all of these are brand opportunities. So we talked about visiting destinations and kind of virtual travel. We can see that's the top interest in both countries. Um, there's a bit more of like a social angle that Americans seem to be interested in. So a lot of like meeting up with friends. But I think overall you can see that Americans are a bit more interested across the board in all of these things, but just by a hair here and hair there.
Yeah, and I would just do the other call, coming back to like what we said a couple slides ago. Like what I find really intriguing about this, and I'm more focused on like the top two options under the UK. It's visiting a destination, seeing a concert live. That to me, and again, when I realized this a number of years ago, that was really an eye opener for me. And bringing this back to the sports connection, right? So, like, I was formerly Monumental Sports Entertainment, NHL's Washington Capitals, go Caps. We were one of the first groups that we put a camera on the first row on the glass, right? And so you could actually see the game live, and we had the opportunity where you could actually watch the game live and see the hockey players, the best seat in the house.
Right.
And like that was the moment where it started to click to be like, holy smokes, like um, eventually you're just going to start selling tickets on a virtual capability here. And so to
Right.
actually get the best seat in the house every single night, I think was fascinating. Fast forward to the middle of COVID 2 years ago, um, wasn't our company. I didn't have the idea because I wish I did. But one of my friends' companies, they did a metaverse holiday party where they ended up hiring a tour guide in France to do a tour of Notre Dame.
Hmm.
And so it was a live tour of Notre Dame from everybody sitting in the US, and they just had somebody with a camera with a 360-degree view. So you were getting
Hmm.
a live tour of Notre Dame halfway across the world. And so like I just find this really fascinating because whether or not you're a brand that has had, difficulty reaching certain types of consumers, like it is really low, it has really leveled the playing field because, if I'm in Washington D.C. and I'm a local pizza shop, I'm going to be advertising with D.C. Sports teams and organizations and events. Doesn't do me any good to advertise in L.A. Right? No one's going to see me in L.A. and come to my pizza shop. But if you're an experiential brand, right, you now have the opportunity where it doesn't matter where you are.
Right.
So I think that's a really exciting piece of this. Not to mention, I think what you called out rightfully so, which is the opportunity to travel and see places that have been more or less unattainable for so many previously just because of resources and costs and travel issues. It's really, really fascinating, and the
Yeah.
possibilities I think are endless.
Agreed. Agreed. And again, I'll always kind of come back to all those are brandable opportunities. Those are all things that
Yeah,
a company can offer at a discount or for free, and that those again, it really I think comes always back to how enjoyable was the experience for the people, and that's where your brand is going to resonate with the end consumer. And I think it's no secret or won't come as a surprise that the gaming community and now this may be a bit of a contradiction because we're talking about how the metaverse opens up whole new doors of entry for new types of quote unquote gamers coming into this virtual space. But the gaming community as it exists today, and perhaps esports fans especially, are very vocal online. So there have been activations in Roblox and others that didn't wow as much as people had hoped. So I think it's always, I'd caution any brand exploring this to just go all the way in and put some investment behind it. Find an expert who understands the metaverse and the audience you're getting in front of, so you create an experience that they're really gonna love and talk about and want to revisit and come back to, and not one that's glitchy and they kind of then just lambast you online, which happens. So we talk a bit about kind of the reasons for gaming, and this is a curious one to look at the trialist versus the curious again. So and as metaverse experiences are evolving, I think this also has some signals to how we get the curious group to convert into trying the metaverse. So early adopters, the trialists, you can see they really spike for interacting with other gamers around the world and completing challenges and puzzles. So this is more of a someone who's fully engaged to the gaming experience, to the point where there's going to be like live communication with others and so on. Bit more of a complex experience, whereas the curious group, and these are general reasons for gaming, not gaming in the metaverse, but the curious group, they are playing games more to relax and wind down and to pass the time. So I think again, this brings us back to traveling in a virtual space. That sounds extremely relaxing, a great way to spend some time. So building new experiences like that would seem to me to signal that that's a great way to draw more people into these spaces. Any other thoughts there, Alex?
I think you crushed it.
All right. And this is a similar one about kind of just some kind of general takeaways on again, most people are interested in feeling that the metaverse can help them interact with new people that have similar interests to them, particularly in the US, and that's the same across the trialists and the curious group. Um, a smaller percentage, but still a sizable one, are interested in having it help with existing friends and family. And then we kind of talked a little bit about this, but there's, particularly in the U.S., about a fifth of folks who feel that life in the metaverse could be better than real life. And I think, we could draw a lot of insight or implications about what that says about society and the mental health and things like that. We won't go down that rabbit hole.
That's a totally different conversation.
Different conversation, but things to think about. I think just keep in mind as people are perceiving what this will be.
Yep.
Okay, and then it kind of a similar. We're on this theme, right, of like what we aspirations for the metaverse and what draws people in. So, in the U.S., again, we see trialists, early adopters. They really come in to experience these new spaces, but not to change so much who they are. So, over a third said they had the same or nearly identical identity in the metaverse as their real life identity. Of course, the metaverse gives you an opportunity to be whoever or whatever you want to be. And then the curious consumer, though, does seem to over-index on having an entirely different avatar to who they are in real life. So I think there's some also just interesting thoughts there. Um, Anything to add there, Alex?
No, I mean, I think um, it's very complementary to, I think, kind of what was on the last slide, which is, you know, the reasons that people are using this, and why are they using it, right? Like, and how do they self-identify? So is it more to test it and be their own versus, oh, the ghost just shut my door, so perfect. A very interactive space that I'm working in here today. Versus, are they coming up with is the metaverse, is it an enhancement to their life? Is it an escape from everyday reality? Are they changing their identity? Do they want to be somebody else again? There's 1,000 different things that we could go down the rabbit hole there, but
Right,
I think this is just starting to speak to that to a certain degree. And again,
right.
something for everybody, I think, is the headline, which is, I think, what makes it so exciting at the end of the day.
Yeah, and there is that thread of the curious folks. They're looking for more of a relaxing, perhaps a less social, interactive experience where they can change their identity and their look and feel. So there is this kind of escapist thread that's coming out for the curious group. Whereas the trialist, they've found there's a huge community around the metaverse already, today, and Web3, and it's all kind of lumped together. But trialists seem to really be um, leaning into that and making it part of their core identity that they are active in the metaverse and the Web3 community. So they want to keep their identity the same. So
I'm curious, and again, this is nothing that we would have data on, but I'll just sort of plant the seed of the question, right? Is
yeah,
the way that the trialists are starting to define this universe, right? In terms of like how they're using it, how they're engaging it. I'll be curious to understand, does that then set the baseline and the trend for how everybody else who follows uses the metaverse? Or are they simply the first mover group? And then it'll really be the masses that come on over time that either redefine or evolve how people are engaging. Now, the cop out answer is it's probably the latter, of it'll just continue to evolve on top of that. But it is always interesting, especially with how you look at any major new, I'll just call it technology, even though I know however you want to refer to it, how that evolves over time and how people are using it. Like how people first use social media, like when Facebook first came out, is very, very different than how it's being used now, and for the reasons it's being used and how it's being applied. And it always continues to evolve. But I think that'll be a really curious case over time to sort of keep an eye on the metaverse in terms of like how trialists are using it today, how much of that stays intact, how much of that continues to be like one of the main focal points versus how does that continue to evolve. And I think that's perhaps what's really exciting as well as scary at the same time for brands, which is you want to get a grasp on this and understand how do you actually use this to benefit your brand and get in front of the right consumers. At the
right,
same time, you recognize this is going to change so much over time. And so, really, what it comes down to is how do you create a plan to really understand the data that's coming in. Shameless plug for trajectory. But how do you understand the data that's coming in and be able to react on that so you can stay and be part of that evolution, as opposed to using it just for one function and then not adapting to how it changes over time.
Yeah. I think it's spot on. I think, personal opinion, I think it becomes all the above. I think you have these, the kind of the metaverse platforms like a Roblox or Sandbox and others, and then within that you have different types of experiences and communities that evolve out of it. So you'll still have kind of those. If the trialists are the ones now that are setting the tone currently, but they're going to be this smaller group compared to the 50% curious that will ultimately come in at some point. But those curious folks will be looking for more of a laid back experience, and so they, with less interaction, as we saw in the previous slides. So I think ultimately the metaverse will have something for all those folks. And then from a brand, you really want to understand, okay, within that, where does your target audience exist? What is the profile of the group you want to get in front of within these spaces? And then what's the best pace the best way to get there and activate your brand. Um, all right, so I think there's just a couple more slides here. This one is around kind of in-game elements. So a lot of the metaverse is being built on blockchain, and so that would imply that your ownership of items like your avatar, like in-game weapons or your avatar customizations and characteristics, are things that you own as an individual. And so there's a theory, a hope, I think, that items will be more transferable between different metaverses in due time. And so here we just see some of the top items that people are interested in bringing from metaverse to metaverse. And again, I think all of these, I mean, especially in-game items, character and avatar customizations, those are very much brandable opportunities. And we already see
Yep.
that in Fortnite and Sandbox, Roblox, and others with some of the examples we saw at the start. But particularly with like esports teams, I think of like Team Misfits. They have their own jerseys in Fortnite, and others out there.
Yep.
Um, okay, and then people don't really think about this often, maybe not often enough, but there are full-on career and income opportunities in the metaverse. There will be a whole economy that exists within this space. So we asked folks, could you see yourself working in the metaverse or earning money so you don't have a job in the real world? And we see that trialists are much more bullish on that, but still a very high percentage, like what is that, 65% of the curious audience in the U.S. Thinks that they could, yes, definitely, or yes, possibly. So I think it's really interesting.
So quit school, just go on the metaverse, make a whole career out of it.
Yeah.
Not what we're saying. But this will be interesting too. I mean, we've seen so much monetization in social in general, right? This will be, again, like there's a lot of different opportunities here to monetize this whole thing, and I could only list a few, and I'm sure that there are thousands. So this will be a really, really interesting one, especially as people, are really coming into the metaverse even more and more and more. Like the monetization opportunities will become that much more important. It's, we were talking about this earlier. It's kind of like Ready Player One,
Right.
situation all over. So
Yeah.
it's fascinating to see what's going to come out of this.
Yeah, it's wild. I mean, I think about, you know, so none of us go to stores in person to buy things anymore. We go online. And then the next evolution of that is kind of this virtual mall. You want to go shopping, you can go into this space and go window shopping and then actually engage with a person, a virtual avatar, about what you want to get. Now, I think trying on clothes, that's a technological hurdle that we will need to solve for, but probably something we can figure out with some AR mirrors and things. But yeah, it'll be really fascinating to see. Um, all right. Lastly, I think that's a good segue into kind of concerns surrounding the metaverse. I think it's really easy to have your head to spin into uh, just apocalyptic type scenarios where everyone's living in a fantasy world and not engaging with the real world. So we did have some questions on that. I mean, first, kind of the barriers to the metaverse. It's really about having the right equipment. So it's everything from the right device through the right PC processing power, and connection speed. So we talked on some of these things earlier. Another call out is the virtual reality makes people sick. I think again, like the metaverse does not necessarily require being a virtual reality experience in the goggles sense.
And I think so much of this is a lot of this will just sort of, I don't know, solve itself in time. And what I mean by that is just like how technology advances, right? And like barriers to entry and like cost of tech. I remember when a DVD player cost it's like $300 when they first came out. And it's like by the end of it, it was like $10 for a
Right.
DVD player, right?
Which was like
So
$500 in today's money, like.
yeah, no, yeah, exactly. It really was. But like not having the right device, not having enough compute power, not having enough speed to be able to do all this, I look at that as I think a lot of that is there today, but over time as technology continues to grow, I think these things will just effectively like everyone will have easier access, less barriers to entry. So I think a lot of that will be solved over time, which again I think just comes back to our general thesis on this is it's beyond just the trialists, but everybody else that's going to be coming into this universe over the next like 3, 5, 10 years. um, all these things are coming together all at the same time, right? They
Yeah.
all play a part. So as technology barriers to entry start to fall, more and more people are just going to continue to come in. So I think that's an interesting piece to call out here is that some of this is just sort of self-correcting with just how technology evolves naturally.
Yeah. Agreed. All right, and then lastly, kind of impact of the metaverse on quality of life, and this is again by the people who are interested and not interested of the group. And we see, again, among U.S. among Americans who are interested, a sizable percent. I think that's what is that, 41%, 42%, who feel that it'll make life better. So there's a lot of optimism, I'd say, around the metaverse and what it could do for all of us. There is still a third in that interested American group who are not sure, or can actually have no impact on quality of life. And then another 25% who are concerned that it could make life worse. Now, among the not interested group, so those who've said they're just really don't want to try it, that view changes a lot, and we see more pessimism there, which follows logically. But I think to your point, Alex, is the kind of the technology and the adoption of it becomes more widely accepted and used, this opinion is likely to change. And then as the population ages as well, again, we come full circle. We know that interest among younger people is a lot higher. So the landscape continues to evolve. All right. Well, that is all we have to share today. So, Alex, I'm curious, after reviewing all this, how are you feeling about bringing your hypothetical brand into the metaverse? I feel like you kind of sold yourself into it a couple times there.
Oh yeah, shameless plug after shameless plug. I mean, I think similar to I think, YouGov and what I know about you guys, right? Like, I think the flag that we're really putting in the ground is we are the most accurate, hands down, best data source for sponsorship data and reporting, right? And I think for us, it's all the more important that we continue to get involved in this space, especially as it's evolving. We're seeing a lot of our own clients starting to kick the tires on this. I think the biggest question mark, as it always becomes for any data organization and company, is the access to data and what's available, right? So like what is going to be available through APIs, how that landscape continues to change. It changes all the time, even on digital today. Um, so I think that's always going to be a big question mark. What is going to be this balance between, data privacy as well as the information that is going to be available, and how do you start to connect these two things together? I have to imagine that as revenue streams like sponsorship does exist, it's always going to be in the best interest to share enough data for brands to make the right decisions about targeting and how to get engaged at the right time in the right space with the right message. So I think there's always going to be something that's going to be available for companies to make informed decisions, organizations like ours to be able to use that data to help empower individuals with insights. And then it's going to be a big question mark, I think, on the evolution of the space. Data is consistently always a freaking mess. Like the world talks about data, but there's so much of it out there, and like we just have to continue to adapt. So even as the data pipelines still come available for organizations like ours and organizations like yours to use this data to help their clients make informed decisions, there's always going to be a surface level of like, how do you get through the noise? How do you distinguish that down? So that's a very long way of saying, It's a lot of work, but there are companies out there to help assist with that and figure it out. But it'll be a lot of work.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a lot of work ahead. Definitely early days, but it seems like all an inevitability at this point, to me at least. Let's just, while we have our last few minutes here, if you have any questions or comments from anyone viewing out there, please drop them in the chat. We'd be happy to talk about it. While we see if any of those come in, we talked just a couple of the brand categories that are already in there. Any particular category, Alex, that you haven't seen in the metaverse that you think would be cool to see?
Oh man, it's bringing me on that. Off the top of my head, I don't think I'm going to venture down that. I think I I mean, like you could probably just name just about anything, quite honestly. And if it's not there, like it will be eventually. I really do think that there are going to be so many splinters of what the metaverse is, and like there's going to be something for everyone. I mean, I wasn't just saying this. This is a book that I keep pretty close to me at all times with Ready Player One.
Hmm.
This is the world that we're going to operate within at some point. So I really genuinely do think the opportunities are endless, and you're going to see so many publishers continue to come up with new avenues to get people to engage. But if you can dream it, I imagine that at some point or another, it's gonna make its way in here. That's
Yeah.
a cop out answer. I apologize. I
No,
realize when I'm being a cop out.
I agree. Lindsay asked, "Are there any games we're personally looking forward to in VR?" I can take that one. I'm a big Skyrim fan. Elder Scrolls. I would love some kind of like super ultra nerdy fantasy medieval situation where I can walk around my living room on a 3D track and hit things with my controller. Like that sounds really really fun.
I am the biggest freaking fan of Walkabout Mini Putt. So that's
Okay,
like one of the first games that came out. I have used that to like connect with friends, connect with family across the world, across the country. Just get a
nice.
good game of putt putt in. And yeah, I'm a very simpleton when it comes to games, but
I love it.
I love that opportunity.
Putt putt might be the ultimate unifier. All right, well,
Hope so.
Alex, such a pleasure, man. Love
Thank you.
chatting with you. Thank you all for tuning in. Hope you gained some insights here today. And yeah, if you ever want to get in touch with either of us, I know you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. Alex, you available?
LinkedIn, Alex at trajectory.com, spelled with a K because we're whimsical. So for what
All
it's
right,
worth.
check it out. And if you're not part of the ESTA already, also check out the Esports Trade Association, putting out great content and insights like this, and doing all sorts of fun things around the country and in your neighborhood. So definitely check them out.
Yeah,
And
big shout out to ESTA. Great
yes,
group.
amen. Talk to you soon, my dude.
Thank you, sir. Have a good one.
Have a good one.
Cheers.